Welcome. I'm Cindy Owenby. I'm a seasoned women's ministry leader and I serve on the women's ministry team in my church. I'm also the founder of Women's Ministry Toolbox. I'm sharing my best tips and resources to help women's ministry leaders like you reach more women in your church with the love of Jesus and the truth of God's Word. Let's get started. Our mini-series on loving our ladies continues today with a look at meals. We're going to talk about freezer meals, meal trains, and funeral meals. But before we get started, I want to let you know that this will be the last episode I'll be recording for 2024. I'll be back in mid-January with new episodes. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving and a Merry Christmas. Like most of the topics we've tackled in this series on loving our ladies, providing meals may or may not be something coordinated through your women's ministry program. But either way, I think you'll find some helpful tips in this episode. Meals can be a very practical way to help our women during times of transition and crisis. Everyone needs to eat, but prepping a meal during a stressful time, it can be a great burden. Providing a meal allows our women to shift their focus away from grocery shopping, meal prep, or DoorDash to their loved ones. So let's start with some basic questions you and your church staff will want to answer. Now, please don't make these decisions in isolation. Your church staff may have some guidelines that they would like to have followed or suggestions they'd just like included. As you think through each one, keep in mind that what you do for one person sets a precedent for the others. If you provide 3 weeks of meals for a new mom, every new mom is going to expect 3 weeks of meals. So question number 1, who is going to receive meals? Will you provide meals for a medical emergency, a death in the family, a chronic illness, cancer patients, and new moms? And let's not forget about adoptions. Think about other special circumstances that you've encountered that might need a meal. Question 2, how many meals will they receive and for how long? Will they receive meals every day, every other day, or just a few days a week? How many weeks will be covered? Keep in mind that most people prepare enough food for more than one meal. Leftovers are quite likely and meals may not really be needed on consecutive days. So who is going to make the meals? Is there a team of women that will prepare the meals? Do you have a freezer meal ministry that has meals ready to go at any time? Will small group members take care of most needs, with others lending help when the need is great? And how will needs be communicated? Will you send out an email to women who've signed up to provide meals for your meal ministry? Will the church staff share needs with small group leaders? Will you use an online sign-up like Sign Up Genius or Take Them a Meal or a meal train? Or will you send out a group text? You'll want to have solid answers to these questions. So let's talk about meal drop-offs. Meal drop-offs can be tricky. Often people receiving the meals have little time, desire, or energy to entertain the person dropping off a meal. We should never, ever assume that we'll be invited in. And chances are they haven't had time to clean their home for company. They may not want to introduce germs into their home. They may not want to answer questions, or they may just want to avoid conversations about their illness, the baby's birth, or their loss. Those delivering meals often do not consider the burden that they are placing on the recipient when they ring that doorbell to drop off the food. What other important information do you need to provide for those preparing or delivering meals? Well, let's start with food allergies and dislikes. Is there a gluten, a nut, or a dairy allergy? Do they not like to eat mushrooms or onions? And a side note here, I'm gluten-free. Having meals prepared for me can cause a lot of stress, to be honest. If you know there's an allergy, please make sure someone who understands can help guide the meal prep and make solid suggestions. For example, gluten is in most canned soups, so casseroles can be a real issue for me. You're going to want to include the address with any needed directions. Maybe they should put it in a cooler on the porch and then send a text. And strongly encourage people making the meals to use disposable containers so the recipient doesn't have to worry about returning dishes. Are you in need of a few meal suggestions for these meals? I've got a few real quick ones for you. Pasta is an easy one that most people go to, and you can pretty easily sub gluten-free pasta if needed. What about soup and a salad? Or chili with toppings and cornbread? And this one's a kid's favorite, breakfast for dinner. Another easy thing is to grab a rotisserie chicken and make some sides. Or what about something more creative, like build your own potato bar or build your own taco bowl, and you just put everything in there separately and they can make their own. About 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to coordinate a funeral meal for a friend when her husband very unexpectedly and suddenly passed away. He was young, about 40, and they have young children, and that made the situation a lot harder. So I did what I tell many of you to do when you have a question. I posted it in the Women's Ministry Toolbox Facebook group, and the leaders had so many great suggestions. Now, some churches provide meals after the service for everyone that's in attendance, but this meal was just for their family. Here are some of the tips that they shared. Provide finger foods and trays, such as a meat, a cheese, a vegetable, or a fruit tray. Pick up fried chicken and ask for others to provide the sides. Ask what the deceased favorite dessert was and make it for this family. It seems to bring a sense of comfort and thoughtfulness. Use real dishes and silverware or fancy plastic plates and really nice plastic utensils. Try to make it special for them. In many churches, they have a set funeral menu. Here's one example: chicken tenders and ham with hash brown casserole, seasoned greens beans, deviled eggs, rolls, and dessert. One church has an organized groups that help with funeral food. The church funds the meat portion of the meal, and the groups each cover one thing: the vegetables, the salads, or the desserts. I've helped with other funeral meals, and one thing that I've noticed is there's always a lot of leftover food. One of the meal coordinators brought a package of gallon-sized bags and aluminum foil so that we were able to send food home easily and quickly with the family. And warm coffee was something I never would have thought of, but it provided comfort when the need arose. So it's something I'll be including in any meals I coordinate moving forward. Now, churches of all size will benefit if someone is leading the effort and setting up some guidelines for funeral meals. Like I said earlier, it may not be something done through your women's ministry program, but it is something that many of your women will be helping with. So let's wrap this episode up with some meal planning tips from other churches. One church has a Helping Hands ministry. Each month, a group of ladies is on call for any needs that might arise: funerals, sickness, etc. One woman serves as the designated lead each month. She coordinates when needs arise, and then if the needs are a lot, they'll reach back out to the group that served prior to help. Another group, they use their meal ministries for outreach. They serve meals to families who've experienced a homicide. The lunches are provided during the trial period, and this serves the family by cutting down costs as they come into town for the trial, but it also provides them a quiet place to gather, to eat, and converse rather than going out in public, something I never would have thought of. Another church, their meals ministry doesn't just provide meals for people in their church too, they also cook meals for their local homeless shelter. When they meet, they prep meals for both. Meals for church members are stored in the freezers at their church. And if your congregation is spread out across a large area, here's a tip you might find helpful. A leader in the Facebook group shared that their church organizes meal providers by zip code. When a meal request comes in, they only distribute the need to the providers in that or close to that zip code. One leader shared that they have a freezer prep day. They stock their church's freezer. She explained that their team of 9 gathered together working on 3 different recipes and made 19 meals. Their meals included casserole, frozen veggies, and bread. She said it was a fun time for all who participated, and they learned how to make 3 different casseroles. What a win-win. Another church with a freezer meal ministry noted that their members grab a bag salad and bread from the store to put with the main dish or casserole from the freezer, making meal delivery a breeze. And grief groceries can be a helpful alternative or an addition to sending meals. Have you heard of grief groceries? It can be the delivery of food and or paper products. Well, our women's ministry team, we pulled together and we provided grief groceries in the form of paper products for a team member when her father passed away. We dropped off paper products and plastic silverware so they wouldn't have to deal with dirty dishes. And we sent lots of toilet paper and paper towels to help with all the extra visitors and family that would be dropping by. If you are a smaller church or you have a small team of women providing meals, it can become a strain on their time and their grocery budget. You may find it helpful to encourage people who don't want to cook to send gift cards or a meal through DoorDash. You might be able to match up some church members who are willing to provide money for a meal with someone else who would love to cook. You could also divide up the menu among several people to ease the expense and the work. Somebody provides the main dish, someone else a couple sides, and the other person the bread and dessert. Well, here are today's Toolbox tasks. Is there a plan to meet the meal needs at your church? If so, it can be helpful to share that with your team members so they know when a need arises. And if your team coordinates the meals, or even if you don't, make notes of the tips and share them with the appropriate people to help smooth your meal process. Meals can be such a blessing to women in times of need, but they can be a burden too. I hope these tips will help us be more considerate as we seek to love the ladies in our church. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Women's Ministry Toolbox podcast. Leading in women's ministry can be lonely, but it doesn't have to be. You'll find support and ideas you can use in the Women's Ministry Toolbox community Facebook group. We would love for you to join us. Search for us on Facebook or visit womensministrytoolbox.com/groups to access the link. May the grace of God carry you through difficult ministry seasons. May He direct your steps as you seek to make Him known, and may your love for the Lord be apparent to every woman you serve.